Well, good evening and welcome to Nashville. I'm Alan Jackson. Many Americans assume that if a child is born within the country's borders, well, that child automatically becomes a citizen. But that's not how most of the developed world operates. Across Europe and nations like Australia and New Zealand, citizenship is generally tied to the citizenship of a legal status of a child's parents, not simply the location of birth. Well, the United States has become one of the few developed nations that still grants broad, automatic birthright citizenship. Well, that reality came into focus recently when the Supreme Court ruled against President Trump's executive order, which limited birthright citizenship for children born to parents who are in the country illegally or temporarily. The court concluded that a president cannot change that policy through executive action. President Trump responded by urging lawmakers to act, saying Congress could easily address the court's decision through legislation. He even took a swipe at the ruling on social media, sarcastically congratulating Chinese President Xi Jinping and saying China had scored a massive birthright citizenship win. Well, officials argue that automatic birthright citizenship has fueled the growth of birth tourism, where pregnant women and foreign nationals travel to the United States specifically so their children will be born on U.S. soil and receive automatic American citizenship. The conversation is about much more than one Supreme Court ruling. Are America's policies benefiting our adversaries like China? Should Americans be concerned that the Chinese Communist Party seeks to expand its influence on elections and American society by any means necessary? Well, there's something across our country that has been pervasive for a season, and it's biblical. Jesus told us it would happen. In Jesus' most lengthy prophetic discourse, one of the signs he described that would characterize the end of the age was that human character would begin to deteriorate and that lawlessness would increase. Well, we see spiritual forces of darkness expressed with increasing boldness and frequency in very tangible ways. We've seen the deterioration of trust in places that I thought were cornerstones of trust. Using lies and deception to influence elections, it's not something new, but during the lead up to the 2016 election, the FBI claimed that the Trump campaign had ties to Russian collusion. The FBI at the time went to a foreign intelligence surveillance court to get warrants to spy on the Trump campaign, even though they knew that they had falsified documents in order to secure that court permission. We saw congressmen and senators stand in front of cameras on a daily basis and accuse Trump of being a Russian agent. Well, this Russian collusion hoax was then echoed in the evening news every day, even though it ended up being proved a totally false narrative. We've seen newly elected Democratic socialists dishonor the American flag, push to defund the police and to denigrate America. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, he used the July 4th holiday to criticize America, all while sitting behind the desk used by George Washington. Mamdani criticized U.S. immigration and customs enforcement agents and capitalism. A few days prior, Mamdani claimed that his balanced budget represents a win for socialists after years of mismanagement by capitalists. However, in reality, Mamdani's budget relies heavily on bailout aid from the state and delays pension payments. Claiming that socialism works while relying on state bailouts and delaying pension payments is not success. It's just passing the bill to taxpayers and future generations. Mamdani then boasted of raising taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers. Well, as a part of his victory lap, Mamdani said socialists can solve years of mismanagement by the capitalist. Well, the media, they gladly went along with it. Where are the loud follow-up questions which mainstream reporters we often see shout at President Trump's briefings? The mainstream media isn't doing a good job of informing the American people. Their efforts are focused on shaping opinion so they can maintain their preferred narrative. It's dishonest. America's 250th birthday should have been a moment of national unity, yet much of the media focused on criticizing President Trump rather than celebrating the nation itself. Veterans, Gold Star families, the founders, and America's achievements received little attention. Receiving far more attention was the media's reporting of polling that showed only 29% of Democrats are proud to be an American. And then the media worked hard to project that gloomy sentiment onto the rest of America. I would suggest to you that deception, lies, and a refusal to acknowledge the truth, it's a spiritual conflict more than it's a political one. And the church had better wake up. In this season, I believe the circumstances that allow evil to flourish will also create the opportunity for the kingdom of God to grow. Deception, wickedness, and immorality, they'll increase right alongside righteousness. The Spirit of God will move in dramatic ways, and we'll have to decide where to focus our attention and where to invest ourselves. Previously, many of us understood that our assignment was to get saved and help other people be saved as well. We really didn't process the assignment much beyond that because our lives were quite stable. I think one of the changes that will characterize the church as we find our place and our stride in this season is that we're going to gain a heightened sense of our kingdom assignment and responsibility. In our current season, candidly, I don't think we'll be able to sustain our faith without a heightened sense of purpose. God created you for a very unique purpose. Let's determine to seek the Lord like we've never done before. In a moment, joining us will be Eric Eggers, the Vice President of the Government Accountability Institute. I'll be right back.
This year, we celebrate 250 years of God's faithfulness to our nation. From backyard picnics and ball games to laughter shared with family and friends, we've been given so many blessings to enjoy together. And in a world that feels increasingly divided, these moments remind us of what matters most: faith, freedom, family, and community. Alan Jackson Ministries wants to help you carry that message with you wherever you may go. This outdoor blanket and canvas tote bag are simple reminders of God's goodness and a way to spark meaningful conversations about faith and the hope we have in Him. Request your limited edition tote bag and outdoor blanket today with your gift of $100 or more at alanjackson.com or call 800-880-5102.
Tonight, we're joined by the Vice President at the Government Accountability Institute, Eric Eggers. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Alan, it's always great to be back with you. How are you?
I'm well. It's been a busy season for the Supreme Court. Last week, they handed down several long-awaited rulings. Maybe the most significant was the one dealing with birthright citizenship. They ruled against President Trump's executive order that sought to limit that. My understanding of the 14th Amendment is that it wasn't written to protect illegal immigrants or birth tourism. What's your take on that, and what are the implications?
Well, I hate to come on your show and agree with you almost immediately, Alan, but I do believe you are correct. And not only do I think most Americans agree with you, but the person who actually introduced the 14th Amendment on the congressional floor in the 1860s also agrees with you. He said specifically that this is not something that's intended to give citizenship to foreigners. It was intended, of course, to provide citizenship to the children of slaves. But this is, it's a very different world that we live in today than we did back when this was proposed. As Justice Alito said during these arguments, 8 billion people live in a world where they're one plane flight away from coming to this country and then having a child who then automatically receives citizenship. And this is not a universally held thing, even though, as the Supreme Court cited, the idea goes back to English common law, but there are more countries in the World Cup this summer, Alan, that actually participate in this kind of birthright tourism, birthright citizenship that we practice here in the United States. And the country that's exploited the most, China, certainly will not give you Chinese citizenship if you go over there and have a child. So we believe that a lot of countries, specifically China, are taking advantage of this and as part of their unrestricted warfare campaign against this country. And we'll see what Congress does next as in their response to this Supreme Court decision.
Well, Speaker Johnson had a comment on the ruling. Listen to what he had to say.
This has been grossly abused in recent years, okay? And that is the case that was being made by the plaintiffs in the case, and we're very sympathetic to that because it is a serious problem. We have it's become a tourism, birthing tourism, they call it, a trend where people will just come and you just come onto the soil and have your child, and then they're able to avail themselves of the welfare state and everything else. It's been abused. I'm very disappointed in that outcome. I think it subjects the country to serious challenges going forward, and we'll have to deal with it as a Congress.
What is the realistic path for President Trump and his administration to deal with this?
Well, first off, I'll just say Speaker Johnson's absolutely correct. China published a letter in the People's Daily or an article in which they touted the benefits of the 14th Amendment and how people could take advantage of this. And these birth tourism companies, of which we've identified over 1,000 that practice this and promote this in the country of China, they advertise that it's essentially access to cradle-to-grave welfare services, from free education to Social Security and other benefits for senior citizens. So he's absolutely right. It is being exploited. I believe Justice Kavanaugh, in his partial dissent, left open a pathway to a legislative solution to kind of, without having to do a constitutional amendment. There may be some options for a remedy there. We'll see. But I do think, at least at the very least, the good news is people have recognized this is an issue that's being exploited. So whether or not they're able to address the birthright citizenship piece of it, I think you'll see them start cracking down on people committing visa fraud, which, by the way, these birth tourism companies actively coach these women to wear loose clothing, lie about their intentions, and then skip out on the bill when they get to the hospital. So I think you'll start to see companies have that law enforced much more aggressively under Donald Trump, and hopefully that acts as a deterrent.
Well, the Supreme Court ruled to protect women's sports last week. It's considered a win by many, but they pushed it to the states to make those determinations. 27 states currently have bans that keep biological males from participating in women's sports. Governor Newsom has said he's not going to change his practices in California. What are your thoughts on that ruling?
Well, I think it's a win for common sense, obviously, and it's funny, you know, what you and I might think is common sense maybe doesn't make it all the way out to the West Coast, because Gavin Newsom has literally been on every side of this issue. Back when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris lost in 2024, Gavin Newsom said, yeah, maybe we don't need to be so aggressive in pushing for these trans rights in women's sports. And, and then he's flip-flopped on this issue, just like he's flip-flopped on the billionaire wealth tax. I do think that we are further removed from remembering one of the issues that I think decided the 2024 election. And it was so, I think, perfectly encapsulated by that Donald Trump commercial. Kamala Harris is for they, them. Donald Trump is for you. And I think when you saw that ad, Kamala Harris pushing for trans surgeries for prisoners and things of that nature, this is just an 80-20 issue, and only the liberal elites want to continue to pretend that this is the right thing. It's not. And I think the Supreme Court decided justly about it.
Well, let's stay with Governor Newsom for just a moment. He's currently under investigation by the DOJ. Last week, it was confirmed that someone in his inner circle wore an FBI wire as they're investigating his former chief of staff. I know you spend a lot of time in investigative research. Do you have any idea how deep that corruption goes?
Pretty deep, actually. So I think there's plenty to take a look at. California has this really bizarre practice known as behested payments, where the governor can basically direct people to donate to causes he's identified, and it's perfectly legal. And his wife also happens to be in this space where nonprofits, she's being paid by nonprofits, and so you've got this kind of blur of money going to nonprofits, some of which has been suggested by him, and then some of that money ends up going to other nonprofits and then ends up in her bank account. So it's messy, it's tricky, but I think at the end of the day, what I've been told is that these investigations are actually not being triggered or kind of commanded from Washington, D.C., that the Newsoms are so shady that this is actually something that was instigated by the Department of Justice offices in Sacramento. So this has been a practice that many people have identified as been, kind of suspect for some time. And Gavin Newsom, sadly, has made a practice of surrounding himself with people in his administration and other appointees that have either criminal records or been charged with crimes or are adjacent to people who have been. So it's kind of bizarre. And I think this is what happens when you decide to run for president, or you float the idea you might run for president, as he did when he announced these charges or announced this investigation. Then I think, your track record starts to be held up to a higher level of scrutiny. We'll see if it deserves it.
Well, Eric, we need to take a short break. I hope you'll stay with us for another segment.
Of course, Alan, anytime.
If you're watching, if you've got your phone close by, you can log on to ajnow.com and send us an email with your thoughts on these topics. I'll be right back. back now with the Vice President of the Government Accountability Institute, Eric Eggers. Eric, we're in another election year. Back in 2018, you wrote a book called Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. I think the book's still very relevant. Do you have any perspectives or comments on the upcoming election this fall, what we ought to be watching for?
Well, I've been very encouraged, Alan. I know sometimes we come on here and we talk about scandals and criminal activity as we did in investigations, including the one that's happening with Gavin Newsom. But I'm encouraged by what I understand the Trump administration to be doing, because this is an issue that they obviously take incredibly seriously. It's an issue they took very seriously their first term. They tried to create this commission, and then unfortunately that commission was sued out of existence by Soros-backed lawyers. So what they're now doing, I think they're being very smart, is they're leveraging the grants that they provide these states through the Department of Homeland Security. And they're basically telling states, listen, unless you go ahead and run your voter rolls through the Homeland Security citizenship database, it's called SAVE, then we're going to kind of withhold some of these grants that we'd otherwise provide for you, the states. They're also asking for states to perform just rudimentary audits, and things like verifying the number of votes cast match up with the number of ballots they're counting, to keep from making sure that maybe accidentally or maliciously they're kind of running pallets of ballots through the scanners multiple times. So I think they're trying to do whatever they can. Leftist states are being obstructionists and trying to prevent them from being able to kind of crack down. These secretaries of states in California and Oregon and Washington don't want to let the Department of Justice look at their voter rolls. So I think they're doing what they can, but I'm encouraged by what I hear, the steps they're trying to take to make sure election integrity is as strong as possible ahead of the midterms.
Well, the Supreme Court ruled last week that the mail-in ballots don't have to arrive on the day of the election. So in essence, extending the period for all those ballots to arrive seems to support California's tendency to count ballots until the chosen candidate wins. What's that have to do with election integrity?
Well, the good news is at least they're saying it's got to have a postage stamp on it, right? And an actual date on it. I mean, some of these states, it's unbelievable, Alan, but some of these states have actually argued in court that they shouldn't even have to have that. So I do think that the Supreme Court decision is disappointing, but I think the larger reaction to it has been positive. People recognize that, of course, when California takes so long and you see the results change and it undermines so heavily the confidence in the election results, people realize there's got to be a better way. In Washington State, Alan, you can actually experience a biblical flood in the amount of time it takes them to send out ballots and count them. It's 40 days. And so people are like, that's just not the way we want to do elections in this country. There's many other countries that have much less sophisticated technology that are able to do these things in one day. And the state of Florida that I live in has cleaned up their act. So that Supreme Court decision, I think, was based on the way the law is written. But I think most people recognize that they want to be able to get results in much more quickly, to have much more confidence than states like California have provided. And the good news is in California this fall, they will have a referendum to require voter ID. And so, I think we're kind of seeing piece by piece small victories hopefully being earned by the citizens so that they can have the election integrity they deserve.
Absolutely. The slate of candidates for this fall is somewhat troubling. Socialists seem to be gaining momentum, and it's not just in New York City. Is the Democratic Party becoming a socialist party, or is this just some aberration in a midterm?
I don't think it's an aberration. And Alan, I think you understand this, and I know your audience understands this. It's interesting. We just celebrated the 4th of July and the 250th anniversary of this great country that God has allowed to exist. And I would say the further we get away from remembering the stories of our founding father, remembering the ideas that we fought for to create this country, then the more we're willing to fall for these attractive lies that socialism is affording. And that's why you see the success of some of these candidates in New York. You see the success of a candidate in Colorado. There's a Michigan Senate candidate who I think seems to be doing well, kind of selling this. But ironically, another Supreme Court decision you haven't mentioned yet, but the one that allows for unlimited coordination between the political parties, the Republican and Democrat Party, and candidates, I think actually may help butt the rise of some of the socialism, because these socialists aren't coming from within the Democrat Party. They're coming from outside groups funded by outside dark money like George Soros. And so hopefully, with the return of equal footing by these political parties we'll see the socialism. You know, it's happening in some of these small urban, or not small, but these urban areas. But I don't believe it has the kind of appeal in larger kind of grassroots America. So hopefully it kind of stays where it is. And I think as more people see it fail, when Mom Donnie is asking for residents in New York City to put their air conditioning thermostat at 78 degrees, I don't think that's a future or a present that most people would choose.
Well, Eric, I thank you for your time today. You always bring clarity to a rapidly changing landscape.
Alan, I'm just trying my best to keep up with you. So thank you. It's great to see you. I hope you have a great day.
I appreciate the effort. In a moment, we'll be back with your emails. Thank you for spending a few minutes of your day with us. Just a reminder, if you ever miss a live episode, you can always go to ajnow.com. There's a full archive there of all the programs. You can watch them at your leisure. They're easy to share with a friend. Thanks for your emails. They're always a highlight. Barbara L. emailed, invite Elon Musk to be on your show. I believe he would be delighted to attend as a guest. Well, Barbara, I'll take that as a prophetic prompt. We will extend an invitation to him. I don't think he'll be intimidated by my intellect. Randy emailed, we live in the wonderful state of California, Oceanside to be exact. Recently we went to visit my sister-in-law where we have to show an ID to be able to visit. And we don't have to show our ID to vote. Something needs to change. I agree, Randy. Common sense is not so common anymore. In fact, common sense makes you exceptional. I pray California gets overwhelmed with some exceptional sense. It'd be a good thing. Lauren E. in Colorado said, isn't there anything that can be done to make the media either be truthful or pay the price if they lie? In the past, I remember tabloids getting sued for telling lies. Well, Lauren, I think the most direct thing we can do is ignore them and encourage your friends to ignore them. At the end of the day, the broadcast media is about numbers and viewers and the money that drives. And if nobody's watching, there'll be a change. Capitalism really has some advantages. We can make a difference just with what we give our attention to. Thank you for your time today. God is moving in the earth. Let's join him in what he's doing. God bless you. Good night.